Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into a story that starts with the hush of rain and the hush of monks' footsteps in a little hilltop temple where time doesn't hurry and even the wind seems to walk instead of run. You're going to hear about a Zen nun who doesn't rush anything. Not her breath, not her tea, not even her sweeping when it's raining. This is a tale of patience, stillness, and learning how even a raindrop can be a wise teacher. And don't worry, you probably won't survive this if you're trying to keep your eyes open the whole time. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that edifed background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The clouds begin to gather just as your feet reach the edge of the stone path. The hill is quiet, but not silent. Leaves whisper above you, their branches heavy with the hush of an oncoming rain. The air is thick and a little sweet, like green tea and old paper. There's something sacred about this moment, and you haven't even stepped inside yet. The temple sits above you, like it's been here for centuries, resting its old bones on the slope like a sleeping animal. The roof is weathered wooden beams, darkened by time and storms. You're not sure what brought you here exactly, only that you were tired in a way that sleep didn't seem to fix. So you walked away from glowing screens and humming machines, away from the small box you live in and the bigger box you work in. And now you're here. A slow roll of thunder breathes across the hills. Not a roar, just a long, quiet exhale. As if the sky itself has been meditating, you step forward. The stones under your feet are slick, softened by moss. A light drizzle begins barely there. You could ignore it, but something in you listens. The soft tapping of raindrops on bamboo gutters, the tiny splashes in the puddles forming between worn stone tiles. A small stone lantern glows faintly near the gate. It doesn't demand your attention. It just waits. And you wonder how many people has this lantern welcomed? How many restless hearts over how many centuries you breathe in? The air smells of cedar and wet earth, of something old and kind. The sort of place where no one rushes and nothing shouts. You hear the distant clink of a bell inside the temple. Not a call, not an alarm, just a bell, just a sound. And oddly enough, it reminds you of your phone. Or rather, how your phone never just made a sound. It always meant something, always pulled you into needing to do, to answer, to act. But this bell, it doesn't need you to do anything, so you don't. You just listen. You step onto the wooden walkway. Your shoes come off naturally, like they are as ready for rest as you are. Bare feet meet smooth old wood. The drizzle continues a soft percussion on the roof. A breeze lifts the corner of a scroll hanging nearby, revealing a single character brushed in black ink. You don't read the language, but it feels like the symbol is breathing. You walk deeper inside, and the world outside, though, never far grows quieter. The sounds narrow. Rain, wood creaking gently, your own breath, and suddenly you feel it the way time stretches here. Not like a clock unwinding, but like a lake holding still water. You're in it now. Held, a small shape moves at the far end of the corridor. You pause. A figure robe, like soft, gray fog, steps unhurried. A nun, you think. Her head is shaved, but not sharply, more like a hill worn smooth by the seasons. She carries a broom, though she isn't sweeping. Not yet. She sees you and smiles. Not wide, not formal, just enough to tell you you're welcome. You bow slightly. So does she. No words, and yet something speaks. The bell sounds again. Deeper this time, like a drop of water, landing in a deep well. The nun walks past you, slowly, her footsteps barely louder than the rain. You follow with your gaze, noticing how she moves, like she's part of the building. Not inside it, part of it. There's a bench nearby, just beneath the overhang. You sit, not because you're told to, because it feels right. The rain grows steadier, and so does your breathing. You remember a quote you once saw on a poster, maybe in a yoga studio, or a cafe, or an app. Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. Back then, it felt like just another thing people say when they don't know what else to say. But here right now, as the rain taps steadily on the temple roof, it doesn't sound like advice. It sounds like weather. It just is. You sit, and the temple sits with you. And the rain. It's been a long time since you've sat without checking, without adjusting, without looking for something to fill the silence. You're not sure how long you stay like that. But time here is like the rain, unconcerned with your plans. Eventually you hear the broom again. This time, softly brushing the corridor, just beyond the doorway. You think about how strange it is that we sweep even when it rains, and yet, maybe that's the best time to sweep. Maybe the real mess isn't the leaves on the path. It's how we forget to look at them gently. So tell me, when was the last time you let it rain without trying to cover up? The broom whispers again this time, tracing a slow arc across the wooden floor. Not a chore, more like a dance. The nun's hands don't press or push, They simply guide, back and forth, back and forth. Like the tide or your breath, if you let it come and go without fussing over it. You watch her sweep while the rain keeps falling. Each tap of the raindrops, each stroke of the broom reminds you how rarely you slow down long enough to feel time, not measure it, not kill it, just feel it. In your daily world, even calm is scheduled. A meditation timer, a mindfulness app that buzzes at the end. But here, there's no timer, only the sound of the rain, only the shape of this moment. The nun looks up and smiles again. She nods toward the open-air garden that rests just beyond the walkway. You stand and follow. It's small and square with stepping stones, leading across a bed of wet gravel. A lone maple tree spreads its arms, wide leaves trembling gently in the rain. To one side, a stone frog sits near a basin of water where rain is slowly gathering, drop by perfect drop. And in the center, framed by moss and stillness, a tall wooden post with a small bronze bell hanging near the top. It chimes once, not by wind or hand, just by the weight of water falling from the edge of a bamboo pipe above it. A trickle forms in a narrow bamboo chute, then spills drop by drop into a hanging bowl. When the bowl tips from its own weight, a single drop falls onto the bell. You stand beside the nun as it chimes again. It's subtle, not a loud, proud sound, but one you feel between your ribs. She speaks softly now, the first words you've heard from her. That bell only rings when it is full, not from force, only from what it's gathered. You glance at her. Her eyes are like morning fog, quiet, warm, hard to look away from. She smiles again, but this one carries something extra. Not joy, exactly. More like knowing. You're wondering why a place like this exists in a world like yours. She says gently. You blink. Maybe you were. It's because even the storm needs a still place to hear itself. She leads you to a bench near the garden's edge. As you sit, the drizzle becomes steadier, and a breeze sends tiny blossoms tumbling from the maple like paper wishes. The nun looks toward the bell again and says, "We often think peace is something we find, but it's really something we remember." She lets that hang for a moment. Then she speaks again, her voice smooth as polished wood. A young monk once came here many years ago, rushed in soaking wet, breathing hard. You could see the city all over him, restless, worried, wanting answers yesterday. You smile because you know that energy well. Maybe you've been that monk. Maybe you still are. He asked me, "How do I make the rain stop in my mind?" I told him. You wait with it. The breeze carries a small gust, and the bell chimes again. A perfect pause. He didn't like that answer. Kept asking other questions. How long do I have to wait? When will the noise go away? But I only told him stories. You glance at her sideways. Stories, she nods. Stories are how truth disguises itself long enough for us to actually listen. She leans forward a little, gaze softening. Would you like to hear one? You nod, and she begins. There once was a young farmer who was tired of the rain. It ruined his planting, made the paths to market slippery, kept his clothes always damp. He cursed it daily. One morning, he shouted into the gray sky, "Why must you always fall on me?" You chuckle quietly. Sounds familiar. Well, the sky answered. Not with lightning or thunder, just a whisper. Then come up here, it said. Your eyebrows lift. The farmer, stubborn as he was, climbed a hill, then a mountain, shouting all the way, I'm not afraid of you, rain. And at the summit, there was only fog. You imagine the scene. Cold wind, wet clothes, silence. He sat down in that fog, too tired to yell anymore. And slowly, the sound of his own breath became louder than the wind. The rain didn't stop, but something else did. The nun turns to you. His shouting, she nods. His shouting. Because the mountain doesn't stop the rain, it lets you hear it better. A moment passes in silence. A bird rustles in a wet bush. A drop splashes on your wrist. You see, she says, we don't escape the storm by outrunning it. We become still enough to understand it. Your chest rises and falls with a deeper breath than you've taken all day. She folds her hands in her lap. So many come here trying to fix their minds. But the mind isn't a problem. It's a pond, sometimes stirred, sometimes still. You look again at the dripping maple leaves, at the ripples forming in the basin where the frog statue rests. Rain landing, rain disappearing. And what happens if you try to smooth a ripple with your hand? She asks. You smile. You make more ripples. She smiles too. Exactly. The bell chimes again, soft and slow. A heartbeat in the temple behind you. The sound of chanting begins. Low and rhythmic, like the purr of a cat or the tide pressing against a sleeping shore. You can't understand the words, but they don't need translating. You feel your shoulders release a little. Your jaw unclenches. Your toes wiggle slightly in the cool air. And then, she says, the question isn't, when will the rain stop? It's, can you let it fall without resisting? You don't answer. You don't need to. The rain continues. The bell chimes again. So ask yourself, now, what would happen if you stopped trying to dry off and simply sat in the rain? The rain gathers softly in the stone basin, drop by measured drop, and you listen. not just with your ears, but with something deeper, somewhere behind your ribs. The nun stands beside you, her robes stirring faintly in the breeze, like prayer flags left out in the wind. She gestures gently for you to follow her. You rise your steps, slow and deliberate, your feet remembering now what it feels like to move without urgency. Together, you walk along a narrow wooden corridor that curves around the temple's side. It's half sheltered from the rain, and the air smells of cedarwood and the faint iron scent of wet earth. Each board beneath you creaks just a little, each step becoming part of the symphony. The rain, the wind, the soft swish of robes. And now your breath steady and aware. At the end of the corridor, you see her again. This nun who seems stitched into the very seams of the temple. She's in the garden, standing in the light rain, sweeping wet leaves from the stones. You almost call out, "Isn't it pointless to sweep in the rain?" But something stops you. Maybe her posture. Maybe the way she lifts one leaf, then another, as though each one deserves its own goodbye. She looks up and sees you watching. "Still raining," she says, lifting her face to the clouds. And yet, the garden changes. You walk toward her, stepping from shelter into the gentle drizzle. The drops fall cool on your skin, not biting, just real. Honest, like a dog's no or a child's question. The nun leans on her broom and smiles. "People ask me why I sweep when the rain will bring more leaves. They say it's futile." You nod, rubbing your arms gently as the drizzle dots your sleeves. "But futility is only a problem when you want an ending," she says. "I don't sweep to finish. I sweep to see what's here." She gestures to the wet stones. "That one's darker now," she says. "The moss is fuller when it's wet. The leaves stick for a moment before they slide away. All of it gone in an hour. But while it's here, it's beautiful." She resumes sweeping. The rain falls. A leaf lands near her foot. She waits until it settles, then gently nudges it aside with the broom, like tucking in a sleepy child. You step closer and crouch to look at the stones. She's right. The color of the rock beneath your fingers is richer now, like slate ink soaked through paper. The moss seems to glow. You'd never have noticed if you'd stayed under the eaves. You sit on a flat stone, the drizzle settling into your shoulders like a soft shawl. And she tells another story. There was a nun long ago, not unlike me, who lived alone in a mountain hut. Each day she swept the path to her door, even though no one ever came. One day, a traveler climbed the mountain and asked her, "Why sweep a path no one walks?" You smile. The question is familiar. You might have asked it yourself, she said, "Because I walk it, and because someday someone might need to find their way here. If I wait to sweep until I see them coming, it'll be too late." The rain slows to a gentle patter. You listen, the story settling in you, like warm tea. The nun continues. We think patience means waiting, but it's really being present with what is while letting go of what should be. You nod slowly. It lands somewhere low in your chest, deeper than logic. She leans on her broom again. You know, when I first came here, I wanted enlightenment to strike me like lightning. I wanted the Buddha to whisper in my ear. Instead, I got mildew in my sandals and back pain from long sitting. But in the middle of one rainy morning, just like this, I saw a line of ants carry a dead moth across the path. You raise your eyebrows. I watched them for 20 minutes, she says, chuckling. One ant kept getting stuck under a wing, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is the path. You smile. Not because it's a joke exactly, but because you understand now it is. The Buddha once said, she continues gently. As a solid rock is not shaken by the wind, so the wise are not moved by praise or blame. She pauses, the rain catching on her lashes. But no one tells you that even rocks get rained on. Even rocks take a very, very long time to become unshakable. She turns her face upward and lets the rain touch her cheeks. What matters is that we return. Again and again, you look at the broom in her hands. It's simple, worn, the bristles uneven from use. But it carries something, not status, not achievement, just attention, just love. Do you know what sweeping taught me? She asks. You shake your head. That even a single leaf deserves a moment. That nothing is beneath our care. Not a leaf, not a raindrop, not a passing thought. She smiles again and adds, and that nothing, absolutely nothing, needs to be finished for it to be sacred. You look out over the garden. More leaves are falling now, some yellow, some red, some still half green. And you realize something. The garden isn't beautiful in spite of the mess. It's beautiful because of it. You watch the nun sweep another leaf slow and kind. The broom catches on a stone. She lifts it and continues undeterred. No irritation, no sigh, just presence. And you ask yourself, what if patience isn't waiting for peace, but noticing that peace is already here, waiting for you? She sets the broom aside. No ceremony, no grand gesture, just gently leans it against a rain-damp post. Its job momentarily complete, not because the leaves are gone, but because for now, that's enough. You follow her under the covered walkway again. She doesn't look back, but somehow you know you're meant to follow. The wooden boards creak softly beneath your feet, still damp from the drizzle. The air is cooler now, the scent of wet cedar, mixing with something warmer, toasted rice maybe. or roasted barley. The kind of smell that makes your stomach sigh and your heart follow suit. She leads you to a small alcove tucked behind a sliding paper screen. You duck your head slightly as you enter, stepping into a room lit only by the cloudy light filtering through shoji panels. In the center of the room, a kettle over a low hearth, a bamboo ladle resting nearby, two small ceramic cups, simple and uneven, as though shaped by wind. She kneels without a word and gestures for you to sit. You do, cross-legged. Your knees complain a little. Your back resists. But soon your body settles, as though remembering how to rest into stillness. She lifts the kettle carefully and pours water into the waiting teapot. Steam curls upward like a spirit escaping gently into the air. The room warms slightly, the scent of roasted barley deepening. She doesn't speak. Not yet. And you don't need her to. The ritual is enough. She picks up the bamboo ladle, dipping it into a separate pot of hot water. Her grip is deliberate, yet loose, like a hand holding a baby bird. I used to rush this part, she finally says, watching the ladle as it pours. Before I realized the tea didn't need me to hurry. It already knew how to steep. You smile. There's a gentle humor in her voice, like someone who's made peace with their own impatience. She pours the tea into your cup, and then her own. You hold yours, letting the heat settle into your fingers. She continues. When I first arrived at this temple, I thought patience was a skill I needed to master. Something I had to do better. She takes a sip. But then I watched the rain. You lift your cup. The tea smells nutty and grounding. You take a sip, warm, earthy, a little smoky, like firewood and old stone. It doesn't punch you with flavor. It unfolds slowly, like a yawn that stretches into your bones. She places her cup down and leans back slightly. You know what the rain never does? She asks. You shake your head. It never rushes. It never says, "Oops, I forgot to soak that leaf." It falls where it falls. Slow, fast, soft, wild, always exactly what it is. You glance toward the shoji panels. Rain shadows blur against them, tiny ghost streaks and rivulets tracing the light. And I realized, she says, I wanted to be more like the rain. You look at her, puzzled. Soft, she grins. Soft. And also stubborn. The rain never hurries, but look what it can carve. You nod slowly, letting that settle. She stands and reaches into a small woven basket beside the hearth. From it, she lifts a tiny scroll bound in faded red string. She unrolls it and sets it between you. A line of brushstroke characters flows down the page. You can't read it, but something about the brushwork feels alive. It's a verse the old abbot used to recite every evening before sleep, she explains. It says, "Let the ladle carry what it can. The rest will return to the well." She looks at you meaningfully. We're always trying to scoop everything at once. Answers, clarity, peace. But the ladle is small. That's not a flaw. That's the design. You sit with that hands still curled around your warm tea. The room hums with a quiet that's never quite silent. You remember something now. A moment from weeks ago. You were standing in your kitchen, scrolling through your phone while your tea steeped. By the time you looked up, the tea had gone cold. You drank it anyway. Bitter sharp. You never even tasted it. But now you taste every note, every rise and fall of warmth on your tongue. There's nothing else pulling at you. No messages, no beeps, just steam, just rain. Just here. The nun sips again, then sets her cup down with care. There's an old image in Zen, she says, of a bowl filled to the brim. If you try to pour anything in, it spills. You nod. The upside-down bowl, she chuckles. That's a different one, but similar. This one reminds us not just to be empty, but to let ourselves fill. Slowly, she gestures to your cup. How often do we drink our lives like fast coffee? We burn our tongues on tomorrow and miss the warmth of now. You look into your cup. It's almost empty. She refills it without asking. And sometimes she adds, "It's okay to leave a little at the bottom. Not everything needs to be finished. Not every answer must be reached tonight." You take another sip, this time slower. The rain taps a little stronger against the roof. Not urgent, just confident. "You know," she says, with a quiet smile, "I used to get so frustrated with myself for being impatient. Even here, I wanted to meditate better, to calm down faster." She leans forward conspiratorially. "And one day, I realized I was yelling at myself in silence." You laugh softly. It feels like something releasing from your chest. How often have you done that? Sat still, but battled every second inside your head like it was a test. She smiles with you, then says, "So I stopped asking myself to hurry, and I started listening, not to silence, but to what the silence wanted to show me." You close your eyes for a moment. Behind your lids, you see the raindrops, not with your eyes, but your body. Each one a note, a breath, a gentle nudge that says, "Ooh, you're here." That's enough. She speaks one last time before the room fades into silence again. The tea doesn't ask to be drunk quickly. Neither should your life. So now quietly, you ask yourself if patience isn't waiting. Could it be a way of seeing? The teacups rest, now empty, but still warm. You place yours down gently, letting your fingers linger a second longer than needed, as if to thank the clay for holding something so still and soft for you. The nun doesn't move quickly. She lifts the teapot, pours the last of the water onto a small stone beside the hearth. You watch it steam and vanish. There's no commentary, no explanation, just a quiet ritual for release. And you realize sometimes we can let go like that too, without words, without analysis. Just let it rise. Let it leave. Outside, the rain has thickened, not pounding, but more insistent now, a million small hands drumming gently on the roof. The nun rises. You follow again. This time, she leads you to a narrow hallway with wooden beams arching overhead, like the ribs of a great sleeping animal. The light is dim, almost blue, filtered through old paper screens. At the far end, a small wooden door waits, weathered, worn smooth by decades of hands. She slides it open, and suddenly, you're standing beneath the edge of the eaves again, looking out into the temple's inner courtyard. Rain pours softly onto the stone path. You hear the gentle clinking of droplets into a large bronze bowl left out in the open. The nun steps out without hesitation. You hesitate. Then slowly you follow. The rain is cool, but not cold. It hits your skin like whispered reminders. Hear now this. You both walk silently into the courtyard to where the large bowl rests on a flat stone. It's wide and shallow, catching the rain. You stand close enough to see your reflection, blurred and rippling. The nun kneels beside it. This bowl has no roof, she says. It accepts whatever the sky gives. You kneel beside her. Rain gathers in your eyebrows. Your shirt begins to stick. She dips her fingers into the water and lifts them. Drops fall freely back into the bowl. Years ago, she begins, a young monk asked our teacher, "Why is my mind always disturbed?" And the teacher answered, "Because you do not let it be filled by the rain." She glances at you, her gaze easy and kind. He didn't understand. So the teacher brought him here, in the middle of a storm, told him to sit with this bowl and watch. You look again into the water. It ripples, clears, ripples again. He sat here for 3 hours, she says. Got soaked to the bone, caught a cold, complained for days. She smiles. But after that, something softened in him. He still got distracted, still grew impatient, but he didn't fight it as much. He let it rain. You trace a fingertip along the edge of the bowl. It's cool, smooth, and slightly vibrating from the impact of falling drops. The Buddha once said, she continues, "Do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment." She tilts her head, letting a drop slide down her cheek like a falling bead of glass. But no one ever said concentrating had to be tight. It can be soft like this. She gestures to the bowl. The bowl doesn't chase the rain. And yet, look, it's full. You sit with that. Let the idea sink into you, like the rain into your clothes. Not heavy, just honest. The water in the bowl is nearly to the brim now. The surface trembles alive with the delicate percussion of the drizzle. The bowl doesn't overflow. It just adjusts, expands through ripples, accepts without resisting. You and the nun sit together in silence for a long while, not thinking, not planning, just existing quietly inside a moment that asks nothing of you. The longer you sit, the more the sounds sharpen. You begin to hear the different voices in the rain. Some drops plunk heavy onto stone. Others whisper through pine needles. A few roll softly down bamboo stalks before dropping like tiny monks descending a mountain. And then she tells you a story. Her voice as soft as the rain. There's an old folk tale she begins about a raindrop who didn't want to fall. She clung to the edge of a cloud, terrified of what lay below. You smile. That already sounds like someone you know. Maybe you. The other drops let go one by one, but she stayed curled in the fluff, crying, "I'll be lost. I'll be nothing." What happened, you ask? The nun smiles, brushing a strand of wet hair behind her ear. She clung so long, the sun came out, and she evaporated. You blink, but she adds, in her next life, she was the miss over a lake. The kind people whispered about. The kind that made them feel like maybe they belonged to something larger. You sit with that. The warmth behind the image. The truth that transformation doesn't always look the way we expect. Sometimes it means falling. Sometimes disappearing. Sometimes becoming part of something too big to name. The nun watches the rain and says, patience is knowing that even fear has a shape. And like the raindrop, it eventually falls or it rises. But either way, it never stays. A bird calls in the distance. The clouds shift just slightly, not clearing, but thinning. You exhale deeply, as if your body had been waiting all day for this one long breath. The nun rises slowly. Rain rolls down her sleeves like tiny pearls. She bows slightly toward the bowl, then toward you. You mimic her. It feels right. Not a performance, a gesture of thanks to her, to the rain, maybe to yourself. As you walk back under the shelter, you realize your clothes are damp, your hair sticking to your forehead, and yet there's no discomfort, only the sense that something has been rinsed clean. Inside, she glances at you and says gently, The sky never explains its rain. It just lets it fall. And so you ask yourself now, what if your restlessness isn't a problem to solve, but a bowl waiting to be filled? The rain slows just slightly, not stopping, just softening, like a tired song slipping into its last verse. You return to the covered corridor, with the nun, both of you, damp and quiet, but not chilled. In fact, there's something warm growing inside you, not from heat, but from presence. As you walk together, she pauses by a moss-covered wall. Near its base sits an old pot, round lopsided and clearly cracked down one side. It's filled with rainwater, though some of it slowly trickles out through the fracture. You crouch beside it, drawn by the way light plays on the water's shifting surface. Leaky pot, you say, softly, more to yourself than to her. She kneels beside you, brushing a fingertip along the cracked edge. Yes, she says it leaks every time it rains. But look, see the moss trailing from its base. It's greenest where the water escapes. You look again. She's right. A trail of lush green fans, out like a secret garden, following the trickle, blooming where the imperfection lives. She smiles. This pot reminds me of a very old story. You turn toward her, ready for another drop of wisdom. There was once a servant, she begins, whose job was to carry water from the river to her master's home. She used 2 large pots each, tied to the ends of a long pole across her shoulders. One pot was perfect. The other was cracked, leaking steadily along the way. She leans closer to the little pot at your feet. Every day, the cracked pot felt ashamed. It delivered only half the water it was meant to. After many seasons, it finally apologized to the servant. "I'm broken. I fail you." You nod slowly, already feeling the weight of that voice. How many times have you thought the same? But the servant smiled and said, "Look behind you on your side of the path." And there, stretching along the trail, were wildflowers. I planted seeds there, knowing you would water them each day. The other pot held all its water, but gave nothing along the way. You stare at the moss again. The soft green threading from the pot's base now feels holy. She continues, "Sometimes what leaks from us is what feeds the world." Her voice lowers slightly, as if sharing a secret not even the wind should carry away. When I first began my practice, I was afraid my flaws would hold me back. I thought I had to be pure, still perfect, to be a good nun. She smiles at her younger self, gently, not unkindly. But then I realized the path isn't swept by perfect hands. It's shaped by the ones willing to walk it again and again, even when they tremble. You brush a bit of moss with your fingertips. It clings tender and damp, reminding you how even the smallest things can root themselves if given time and kindness. She looks at you. What have you been told is your flaw, you hesitate. Then you think of all the things too sensitive, too slow, too distracted, too unsure. She nods as if she hears them anyway. Good, she says. Those are where the rain gets in. You glance at the pot again. How many of us try to seal our cracks, to hide them behind polish and perfection? But here, this flawed old vessel has been allowed to simply be. And in doing so, it becomes something more, a source, a channel, a giver. The nun rises and starts to walk again, and you follow, slower this time, still turning the story over in your mind, like a stone in your pocket. Around the corner, you find another small garden, this one quieter, framed by ferns and low bamboo. A few smooth stones rest in a careful pattern around a central patch of moss. She kneels again, motioning to a particularly lumpy rock. That one came from the stream near the base of the mountain. Most people pass it by. It's crooked, jagged, but look how it fits here. She places her palm on its surface. In Zen gardens, we don't place stones by symmetry or size. We place them by feel, by presence. That's why the broken ones are so often chosen. You sit again. The dampness in your clothes, now simply part of your skin, like the scent of pine, or the taste of tea still lingering on your tongue. The rain begins to fade. Just a whisper now, just enough to stir the leaves. She turns to you, face calm as still water. The Buddha said, "Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace." She looks again at the cracked pot in the distance. Sometimes that one word is your flaw, spoken softly, held gently, not fixed, just understood. The wind stirs through the bamboo behind you, and the stalks clack together in quiet rhythm, like bones, like breath, like time knocking, once on your shoulder to say, "You're still here." She stands and offers you her hand. You take it. It's dry and warm, strong in the way only softness can be. As you rise, she says, "You don't need to be whole to be holy." The words land quietly, like petals on water. You both turn back toward the path. The sky a little lighter now. A single ray of sun, so shy, it barely touches the ground, finds its way through the thinning clouds. You remember the moss, the flowers in the old story, the crack that let the water fall. And as you walk, you ask yourself, what beauty have you unknowingly watered along the path with your so-called imperfections? The two of you walk in companionable silence. Footsteps soft against the temple's stone path. The drizzle has paused, but water still falls here and there, from the tips of leaves, from the edges of the roof, from the bamboo gutters, sending gentle rivulets to the garden below. The world feels rinsed, not erased, just softened. You pass a small wooden bench by the main hall. The nun pauses, then sits with a sigh, not one of weariness, but of settling in. You join her damp sleeves, brushing. Before you, the path curves gently, leading toward the trees. Something shifts at the edge of your vision. There, perched on the lowest step of the temple, is a toad, plump, damp, still as a stone, yet unmistakably alive. A little monarch of puddles, right at home among the moss and mist. You both watch it. The nun smiles. There he is, she says. He visits when the rain is soft enough. You tilt your head. A temple toad, she nods. Doesn't speak. Doesn't chant. But he understands everything. The toad shifts its weight slightly. One slow, deliberate motion. A single blink. She leans closer, her tone dipping into story. Once there was a young monk who was tired of being tired. He meditated every day, but found no peace. Every breath felt like struggle. Every silence echoed too loudly. One day, during a long rain like this one, he stormed out of the hall, flopped under a tree, and shouted to the sky, "Why won't peace come to me?" You smile the familiarity of it, aching in your chest. Haven't you done the same? Maybe not under a tree, but in traffic, in meetings, in the silence of your bed at 3 a.m. The monk lay in the mud, furious and wet, until he noticed something watching him. A toad, sitting on a stone, blinking slowly in the rain. Calm, utterly unmoved. The nun leans forward, voice soft like moss. The monk shouted, "How can you be so content? You're just a toad." And the toad blinked, once licked a drop of water off its eye, and turned away. You chuckle. "That's it," she nods. "That's it." You look again at the toad by the step. It hasn't moved. It's not in a rush to explain itself. She says, "The monk later told his teacher what happened. The teacher only laughed and said, 'Good. The toad taught you what I could not.'" She glances at you. Sometimes peace doesn't speak in our language. It speaks in stillness, in waiting, in a creature that has nowhere else to be. You both watch the toad blink again. Then, with slow gravity, it turns and hops once, then again into a puddle. "And off he goes," she says, smiling. You sit quietly for a while, letting the image settle. "It's strange," you say eventually, "how calming that was." She nods, because the toad didn't try to be calming. He just was. You glance at her. "Is that what we're aiming for?" She tilts her head. "Not aiming, just loosening." Another long silence. In the distance, the low sound of temple chanting rises again, soft and deep, like it's being carried up from the earth rather than down from the hall. The nun leans back. The Buddha once said, "You yourself must strive." The Buddhas only point the way. She traces a fingertip along the bench's wooden edge. I used to think that meant effort, trying harder. But now, I think it means being willing to see. Even when the lesson comes in the shape of a toad, you smile, letting your breath come slow and full. The world feels unhurried. Your thoughts still flutter, but they don't pull so hard anymore. You can let them pass like clouds or raindrops without naming or fixing. The nun looks toward the garden. Sometimes when we're hurting, we want a lightning bolt, a thunderclap, something big to wake us up. She gestures toward the path, but more often it's a wet toad on a quiet step. You nod. The simplicity of it rings like a soft bell. She says, "That monk who shouted at the sky, he's the one who ended up staying the longest, became the next teacher. Not because he was calm, but because he stopped needing to be anything." The toad is gone now. Maybe under the bushes, maybe just around the bend, but something of him stays behind the slow breath, the wide silence, the unapologetic pause. You inhale deeply, and for once, the breath doesn't catch. You close your eyes for a moment. Behind them, the sound of rain on leaves, the faint smell of wet stone, and a toad who talked without saying a word. So now ask yourself, what would your peace look like if it didn't need to impress anyone? Not even you. You stand again with the nun, leaving the bench and its silent visitor behind, and follow the path winding toward the edge of the garden, where the trees cluster more tightly. The rain has nearly stopped. A single drop falls from a branch overhead and lands with a soft tap on your shoulder. Like a gentle hand, not interrupting, just reminding you it's still here. The air feels different now, more still, as though the earth has exhaled. You step beneath a tall pine. Its branches sway slightly heavy with water, but the ground beneath it remains mostly dry. Just a few scattered droplets fall now and then, tapping softly against the broad stone beneath your feet. The nun joins you under the canopy of green. She looks up, her gaze following the slow fall of a single raindrop from the tip of a pine needle. "It takes its time," she says, almost in a whisper. You both watch the drop fall. It spins once, clings for a heartbeat longer, then finally releases, landing on the stone below with barely a sound. You stand there, letting the stillness gather around you like a shawl. It's a different kind of silence now. Not the absence of noise, but the presence of stillness. The nun turns toward you, her voice slow, thoughtful. There's something about pine trees. They don't bend the way bamboo does. They don't bloom like cherry blossoms, but they stay, even through heavy snow. even under stormy skies. You touch the trunk beside you. It's rough, firm, cool. The Buddha once spoke of impermanence, she says. All conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. She lets the words settle into the space between you, like another falling raindrop. This tree will lose its needles, she says. It will grow slowly, unevenly. Branches may break, but it doesn't resist. It doesn't cling to how it once looked. It simply continues. A breeze moves through the branches above, and another shower of soft drops falls from the canopy, like stars slipping from the sky. You watch as a tiny puddle shivers, then calms. She kneels and touches the wet stone. You know, I used to think stillness meant stopping everything. But the longer I practiced, the more I realized stillness isn't the absence of movement. It's the presence of peace, even as things change. You sit beside her, your legs folding beneath you, without protest this time. The ground is cool, the scent of pine deep and earthy. She glances at you. Once, when I was newly ordained, I cried beneath this very tree. You turn toward her gently. I'd spent days trying to still my mind. I'd read the sutras, done the chanting, folded every robe just so. But my heart kept racing. Thoughts kept crashing in. She chuckles. I thought I was broken. Everyone else seemed so peaceful. You nod something in your chest, recognizing that ache, that pressure to be still on the outside while storms rage quietly within. She continues. But then I heard the rain. It had started just like this. Soft, unannounced. I looked up and watched it fall from the pine, one drop at a time. I sat there, wet and tired, and realized stillness wasn't something I had to make. It was already happening. All I had to do was stop fighting the noise. She turns her palm upward. A drop lands gently in the center of it. She smiles, watching it pool. There's an old parable, she says softly. A student asked a master, "How can I still my mind?" And the master said, "Bring me water in a bowl." The student did, and the master dropped a pebble in it. She reaches into her sleeve and reveals a tiny stone. She sets it beside you on the pine-rooted ground. When the water rippled, the student frowned. Now it's not still. But the master said, "No, it is. It ripples and it returns. That is stillness." You close your eyes for a moment. Inside your mind, you can feel the same thing. A ripple, a swirl, and the gradual return to calm. You open your eyes. A small spider weaves between two low branches, its web catching tiny droplets, each one glinting like glass beads. A breath catches in your throat, not out of fear, but awe. The nun watches too. It doesn't resist the rain, she says. It weaves with it. You sit a little straighter, not stiff, just more awake somehow. She continues her voice, just above the hush of pine needles. We often think meditation means shutting things out, but it's more like sitting beneath the pine, letting the drops fall, letting the wind pass through. She reaches for a fallen pine cone and sets it between you. It's small, tight, not yet open. In time, she says, this will open, but only after enough rain, enough quiet, enough patience. You nod. The rain, the pine, the spider, the waiting. You don't need to speak. Something within you has understood without needing language. Stillness isn't something you have to build. It's something you uncover by sitting, by staying, by letting the drops fall one by one without trying to catch or name them. The nun places the small stone back in her sleeve. The pine doesn't try to hold the rain, she says. It lets it fall. And somehow, that's enough. You look up again, eyes tracing the branches. A raindrop catches the light, hanging like a miniature world for one suspended breath, then lets go. And now ask yourself, what might you find if you stopped trying to hold the rain and let it fall through you instead? The quiet beneath the pine lingers like incense, slow to fade. You and the nun rise together, neither rushing, neither speaking. There's a shared stillness now, not silence, but a sort of understanding that doesn't need to be named. She leads you back toward the temple, your footsteps soft on the damp stones. As you walk, a new sound finds you. Not the rain, not footsteps. Something thinner, gentler, a soft metallic chime. You turn your head. Hanging from a slender beam just under the eaves is a wind chime, bronze, and nearly hidden by a trailing vine. It moves slightly stirred not by wind, but by the echo of recent rain. One drop falls from the roof, above landing on a long wooden paddle that nudges the chime just enough to release a sound. Not sharp, not high, just a note. A gentle reminder. The nun notices you looking. That's the silent one, she says. You tilt your head. It's not silent. She smiles. Ah, but for years it was. She walks toward it, brushing the vine aside. It was a gift from an old layman who used to sit outside the meditation hall every morning. He said it was for listening, not to the chime, but to what it made you notice when it didn't ring. You move closer, listening. One drop, ding, then stillness, then nothing. She stands beneath it, tilting her head. Sometimes we focus so hard on what's loud, we miss what's quiet. We miss the space. You look at the chime again. It doesn't shimmer like the others you've seen. The metal is dark, weathered. The paddle is chipped, but the sound it makes when it comes is enough to stop you in your tracks. Long ago, she says, a monk asked his teacher, "How can I hear the Dharma?" The teacher answered, "Go listen to the bell that never rings." You frown slightly, trying to follow. She explains, some truths don't come through words or sounds. They come in the space between, in what's not said, like that quiet moment between a raindrop falling and its splash. You close your eyes for a moment, trying to hear it, not the chime, but the space around it. And you do. The quiet, the breath between sounds, the hush that holds them. She walks around the chime and points toward a narrow bench just beneath it. He used to sit here, she says, meaning the layman, every morning, rain or not, just waiting to not hear the bell. You smile, sitting where he once sat. The wood is damp, but welcoming. The chime sways gently above you, but this time makes no sound, and yet, something inside you feels louder than ever. Your thoughts, though fewer, ring clearer now. Not demanding, just present. You watch the vine around the chime shift slightly. A drop lands nearby. No sound this time, just the memory of one. She speaks again. When I first came here, I hated that chime. It felt like failure. I wanted it to sing for me. I wanted proof I was listening well. You chuckle quietly. Of course. You've felt that too, needing a reward for your stillness. A sign that you're doing it right. But it taught me, she continues, that listening doesn't always mean hearing. Sometimes it means allowing space for things to arrive. She glances toward the garden. So much of modern life is noise, sound layered on sound. But the Dharma often comes in whispers, not shouts. And if we're too full of sound, we miss it. You look again at the chime. You wonder how many people have passed it by thinking it broken. How many never realized it was working exactly as it should. The Buddha once said, she adds, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. You wonder, what about one pause that brings peace? Another drop falls. Ding, you breathe in. The air enters like water into a thirsty root. Cool, clear. She sits beside you now. There's a koan, she says, that asks, what is the sound of one hand clapping? You nod. You've heard it before, usually told like a joke or a puzzle, but she looks serious now. It's not about the hand, she says. It's about what we expect. We think truth will sound like a shout, like clarity. But sometimes it's a hand resting quietly, not clapping at all. You glance down at your own hand. Open, unmoving, she adds. Sometimes presence is the thing that doesn't arrive loudly. You sit together for several breaths. a breeze moves, now finally rising, brushing past your cheek like a whisper. The chime stirs. It doesn't ring, but you feel it anyway. The air is thick with quiet that isn't empty, but alive. She says nothing more for a while, and neither do you. Eventually, she stands and touches the chime with 2 fingers. Not enough to ring it, just enough to feel its weight. Then she turns and walks slowly back toward the temple. You sit a little longer, letting the silence do what it does. Best soften the edges of your thoughts until they feel like feathers instead of stones. And as the wind shifts and the chime stays still, you ask yourself, what if the truth you seek isn't hiding in the sound, but in the space just before it? You rise slowly from the bench beneath the silent chime, your body remembering how to move without urgency. The air feels different now, lighter somehow, like the rain washed not just the trees and stones, but something inside you too. The nun is waiting nearby, her robes damp at the hem, her posture as easy as the mist curling through the courtyard. She beckons, not with a hand, but a glance. You follow her. Once more, steps slow and sure. Around a corner, through a narrow passage, until you reach a small wooden room with open walls on 2 sides. Inside, simple cushions line the floor. On the far side, a low altar holds a single candle unlit beside a bowl filled with polished river stones. She enters first and kneels near the bowl, motioning for you to join her. As you sit, your eyes are drawn to the stones. Smooth, rounded, dark gray and black, worn down by years of moving water. The nun reaches into the bowl and lifts one stone into her palm. I carry these in my robe, she says. Not all at once, just 1 or 2. When my mind is busy, when I forget how to be grounded, she places it in front of you. It makes a soft, solid thunk against the wood. Feel it, she says. You lift the stone into your hands. It's cool, heavy, but not burdensome. You press your palms around it, feeling its perfect imperfection, smooth from years of travel, yet etched with tiny lines like a map. These came from the river at the base of the mountain, she says. They were sharp once. Now look at them. You nod, rubbing your thumb along its curve. The river shaped them. She smiles. Yes, but not all at once. Not by force, just by being moved over and over by what passed through. She folds her hands in her lap. The Buddha once said, "A jug fills drop by drop. So does wisdom. So does peace. So does your sense of self." You place the stone down, but not far. You like the way it feels near you. Solid. Present. She reaches into the bowl again and pulls out a second stone, smaller, rounder. I wore this one in my robe the day I left everything, she says softly. my home, my name, my old ambitions. You look at her with quiet curiosity. What did it feel like? She tilts her head, heavy. And then, light. She passes you the stone. It's smaller, but warmer, as if it remembers being carried. She continues. We all carry something. Worries, regrets, hopes that haven't bloomed yet. Most of it we pretend not to feel. But if we name it, if we hold it gently, it changes. She gestures toward the bowl. That's what these are for. Each one is a breath made solid, a thought acknowledged, a fear listened to, not judged, just felt. You reach in now, your fingers brushing over the smooth stones. You pick one flat wide, like a skipping stone. What would this one be, you ask? She doesn't answer right away. Then she says, maybe that's the one called not enough. Or maybe too much. She smiles gently. Pick it up. Give it your breath. You hold it in your palm, then exhale slowly. Not a performance, just an offering. The air leaves you, and the stone accepts it in silence. You return it to the bowl. The nun lights the single candle. Its flame flickers once, then settles like a pupil adjusting to the dark. She places the bowl before it. I keep them here, she says, to remind me that even burdens can be beautiful if we stop trying to hide them. You watch the stones shimmer faintly in the candlelight. No longer just objects, but witnesses, companions. She turns toward you, folds her hands, and bows her head briefly. Would you like to chant with me? She asks. You nod, not because you know the words, but because something in you says yes. She begins, not loud, not performative, just a low, steady tone, the same frequency as rain on stone. The words are ancient, unfamiliar, but the rhythm is simple. You follow not in language, but in breath. Together, you create something, sound woven from silence, presence wrapped in repetition. The flame flickers again. The river stones rest quietly. And in this moment, you forget to strive. You just chant. You just are. When the final syllable fades, she lets the silence return like a familiar guest. You both sit quiet again. She looks down at the bowl. This one, she says, picking up a tiny white stone, is joy. You smile. Of course it is. It's small, easy to miss, but it shines differently than the others. I carry it when I forget to laugh, she says. You ask, what about sorrow? She picks up a dark stone, nearly black. This one, she says, is for sorrow. But it's smooth now, worn soft. I keep it next to joy. She places both on the floor, not apart, but side by side. They belong together, she says, just like the rain and the dry season, just like breath in and breath out. You sit with the image, 2 stones, 1 flame, 1 you. So now, close your eyes just for a moment and ask yourself, what stone are you carrying? And can you hold it a little more gently? The candle flame sways, faintly disturbed by a whisper of wind that threads through the open wall. Its light pools across the polished stones in the bowl, casting small shadows that look like passing clouds. You watch it all without needing to explain it. Just presence, breathing alongside flame and stone. The nun stands her movements like water poured into a new shape. She nods once toward the hallway, and you follow her, still warm with the echo of the chant. As you walk, a familiar sound begins to rise, soft, rhythmic, like footsteps through fog. It's chanting, but not hers. You approach the main hall again, where a few other nuns, gray-robed like mist, are gathered near the altar. Some stand with palms pressed together. Others kneel on low cushions, foreheads gently lowered to the floor. A bell chimes once, then again, and the sound settles into you as if ringing inside your ribs. She gestures gently, guiding you toward the edge of the open space where you sit half-sheltered beneath the eaves. The floor beneath you is cool and smooth. The rain has returned, not heavily, just enough to remind you it's still part of this place, part of this night. As the chanting continues, she joins them. No announcement, no drama, just a returning. She stands with them, closes her eyes, and adds her voice, low, steady, and kind. You sit back and listen. Not to the words, you don't understand them, but to their texture, their rhythm. It's not a performance, it's a weaving. Each voice a thread. Together, they form something strong enough to hold silence. You sit cross-legged, again, hands resting softly on your knees, and let yourself join not by sound, but by breath. 1 in, 1 out. 1 in, 1 out. Behind the chants, the rain begins tapping more steadily again. Puddles gather at the edges of the stone courtyard, their surfaces rippling with each drop. You notice how the chanting never speeds up, never tries to match or resist the rain. It flows beside it, like 2 rivers that know how to run parallel. You remember something the nun said earlier, and it circles back like a quiet bird. Stillness isn't the absence of movement. It's the presence of peace. One of the nuns steps forward and lifts a small wooden stick. She gently taps a singing bowl near the altar. Gong, the sound blooms out into the air, round and deep. You feel it more than hear it. Gong, another breath, another wave. Gong, each time the sound reaches further inside you, as if smoothing the stones of your inner stream bed. The chant fades naturally, like the wind easing. Not a sudden end, just a letting go. One by one, the nuns bow and return to stillness. The hall becomes quiet again, except for the rain and the fading echo of the bowl. The nun returns to your side, kneeling beside you. She places a hand softly on the floor. "This is how we greet the rain," she says. You look out again. The puddles are fuller now. You see your reflection in one faint, wobbled by ripples, but there, present. We chant not to be heard, she adds, but to listen. Sometimes our own voice carries the message we need. She looks over at the altar, where the flame still glows. The Buddha said, "Your work is to discover your work, and then, with all your heart, to give yourself to it." She turns back to you. But that work may not look the way you expect. Sometimes it's breath. Sometimes it's a single, quiet note that echoes longer than 1,000 shouts. She reaches behind her and brings out a small folded cloth. Inside is a weathered parchment. Unfolded, it reveals a single brush stroke, long curved, incomplete. You look at it puzzled. She says, "This was the last brush stroke an old master made before he died. He never explained it. Some say it's a circle not yet closed. Others say it's the path we walk, not straight, but curved, uncertain, and alive. You stare at it. Somehow, the more you look, the more it speaks. Not in sentences, in pauses. Chanting helps me remember that unfinished is sacred too, she says. That a sound does not need to be perfect to be true. You glance down at the puddles again. They shimmer now with candlelight, reflecting from the temple's inner altar. One drop falls, disturbing the light for a moment, then it returns. Have you ever sung just for the sound of it? She asks. Not for the tune, not for an audience, just because your body had something to say, you think? Maybe as a child, maybe once in the shower, but not lately. Not when the world feels like it's always listening and judging and weighing every note. She sees the hesitation in your eyes. There's a story, she says, about a monk who couldn't sing. His voice cracked. His rhythm wandered. But he chanted every morning while sweeping leaves. You raise your eyebrows, and one day, a traveler asked him, "Why sing if you can't do it well?" The monk shrugged and said, "Because the leaves know when I'm awake." You laugh softly, the sound catching on the wind, like a little bird taking flight. Not everything we do must be art, she says. Some things are just presence, just greeting the day, or the rain, or the fact that we're still breathing. The bowl rings once more. A closing note. The rain softens again, as if in response. She rises and looks at you with warmth in her eyes. You don't have to chant. But remember, your breath is a chant. Every inhale, every exhale it's already a sacred sound. You nod, placing a hand over your heart without thinking. The rhythm beneath it is slow, strong, imperfect, and enough. So now, as the rain whispers across the stones and the echoes of chanting drift away like steam, ask yourself, what if your voice, even trembling, was never meant to impress, only to be heard by the moment itself? The rain is tapering now, not so much falling as lingering, gathering on the edges of things hanging in droplets on leaves, eaves, and eyelashes. The courtyard glistens in the dim light, like it's just been polished by the sky. The nun gestures again, guiding you back into the smaller tea room, where the air still holds the scent of roasted barley and candle smoke. She sits beside the low table, and once again, you follow her lead. She opens a small, lacquered box resting in the corner. Inside, resting gently on folded cloth, is a single ceramic bowl, wide and slightly warped, glazed in soft green and pale gray. You notice immediately it's upside down. She lifts it with both hands, slow and reverent, and sets it upright on the table. This is the empty bowl, she says. We use it for offering and for remembering. You tilt your head, curious, remembering what? She smiles and brushes one finger along its rim. That you cannot receive anything if your bowl is full or flipped. She pauses, letting her gaze rest on the bowl like it's an old friend. There's a parable, she begins, about a scholar who came to study with a Zen master. The scholar was clever, full of ideas and words, credentials and questions. He spoke at great length about all he had read, all he had practiced, all he hoped to achieve. You already feel the end coming, the familiar arc. The master listened patiently. She continues, then poured tea into the scholar's cup. He kept pouring. The tea spilled over onto the table, onto the scholar's robes. You can't help but smile. And the scholar protested. She nods. It's full? No more will go in, he cried. And the master simply said, yes, just like your mind. She runs her palm over the table's wood grain. I first heard that story when I was very young. I thought it was about being humble, about not bragging. She looks up at you, eyes a little brighter now, but now I think it's deeper. It's not just about ego. It's about space, about letting go of even the good things, just long enough to make room for what you can't yet imagine. You nod slowly. There's a truth there you've felt before. How sometimes your plans, your self-help lists, your podcasts, and mantras fill you so full of trying that there's no room left for simply being. She picks up the bowl again, cradling it in her hands. This bowl, she says softly, once belonged to a nun who never spoke. You blink, surprised. Never, she nods. Not once. Not in 20 years. She took a vow of silence, not to prove anything, but because she had listened so much, she realized that all her speaking had been echoes. You sit quietly with that. The idea both beautiful and slightly haunting. One morning, the nun continues. Someone left a note on her doorstep, asking for guidance. The writer said they were overwhelmed, heartbroken, unsure what path to follow. She runs a thumb along the bowl's rim. The silent nun took this bowl. She placed it upside down on the step, then walked away. You glance at the bowl in her hands, now imagining it waiting there, saying everything without a sound. The next day, the bowl was upright again, she says. Not by her hand. The writer had returned, ready perhaps to listen. You take a deep breath, letting it fill your lungs, then empty slowly. Like pouring tea, like waiting for the echo to fade before speaking again. She sets the bowl down upright, this time with a folded cloth tucked beneath it. This is the way of readiness, she says. Not grabbing, not achieving, just turning your bowl upward and trusting the sky to rain. Outside, a single drop falls from the edge of the roof and lands in a nearby basin. Plip, just one drop. But it fills the silence completely. You glance down at your own hands, imagining the invisible bowl you carry, the one that fills with worry, with hope, with stories, with noise. Sometimes too heavy to lift, sometimes upside down. She watches you and says, "We think being empty means lacking, but in practice, it means available, clear, receptive." You remember a moment, weeks ago, when you sat on your bed, surrounded by tabs open on your laptop, a half-written email, a meditation app paused mid-session. Your bowl was full, so full you couldn't breathe. But here, in this quiet tea room, with nothing but a candle and a story, you feel spacious. The nun leans back slightly. The Buddha taught that clinging is the root of suffering, and sometimes we cling even to our efforts to be free. You smile faintly. There it is again, that gentle paradox. The more you try to be calm, the more restless you feel. She adds, "The rain does not cling. It lands, flows, disappears. It trusts the cycle." She reaches forward, tips the bowl just slightly, and you watch as the candlelight inside reflects across the curve of the ceramic. This, she says, is enough. You let your breath fall into rhythm with hers. A slow inhale, a quiet exhale. And now, holding the image of the bowl, ask yourself gently, if you turned your bowl upright, empty open, what might finally find its way in? The bowl sits quietly between you, its soft glaze catching the flicker of the candle like a reflection of the moon on a still pond. Outside, the rain has retreated completely. Now, leaving behind a hush that seems to press more deeply into the bones of the temple. Even the birds are still perhaps listening too. The nun stands without a word and gathers her sleeves in the old habit of temple grace. You rise as well, following her out into the soft, washed courtyard once more. The stones are damp, darkened from the rain. The scent of wet earth and pine hangs low in the air. She leads you to a storage alcove just beside the temple's outer gate. From within, she retrieves a small wooden tray with a handful of unlit paper lanterns, each one carefully folded their frames, as light as breath. You look at her question forming on your lips, but she simply places the tray in your hands and picks up a long, thin taper. "Come," she says gently. Together, you walk down the narrow path to the far side of the garden, where a few shallow stone bowls have been placed along the trail. You can see now how the garden has changed. With the rain, the gravel paths slightly shifted, the moss glistening more vividly, the trees now wade with water and silence. You help her place the lanterns, one by one, along the stone edge, each one standing upright, delicate yet firm. Then she lights the taper and offers it to you. You hold the flame like it's something ancient, sacred, because it is. The small fire trembles at the tip of the taper, but it does not falter. With care, you light the first lantern. The paper glows immediately, not harsh, but like sunrise through fog. You light the next, then another. One by one, the garden becomes illuminated, not with brilliance, but with warmth. The nun kneels beside one of the lanterns and speaks her voice like wind moving through reeds. Lanterns are not for driving away the dark, therefore reminding us that we are not alone inside it. You pause, the taper in hand. That truth lands somewhere low and true within you. You light the next lantern even more slowly. She watches the flame settle into the paper shell and says, "There is a story old and mostly forgotten about a boy who was afraid of the dark. He believed that if he could gather enough light, the shadows would disappear." You listen as the taper flickers gently in your fingers, dancing with the story. So he collected lamps and candles, mirrors and torches, even fireflies in jars. He lit them all, but still the shadows remained. Finally, in frustration, he sat down in the middle of his glowing room and wept. She lights the final lantern and breathes out. An old monk walked by and asked him why he was crying. The boy said, "No matter how much light I gather, the darkness stays." The monk smiled and said, "Then stop chasing the shadows. Sit still and let one small light be enough." You stare into the glow of the nearest lantern The shadows it casts on the stones dance gently alive and welcome. The Buddha taught, she says quietly, if you light a lamp for someone else, it will also brighten your path. She gestures to the line of lanterns, now softly glowing around the garden's edge. We light these for no one in particular, but someone someday will walk this path at night, and they'll see them, and maybe they'll breathe easier. You sit with that thought, the strange comfort of unseen service, of kindness that doesn't need an audience. The taper burns lower in your fingers. You gently blow it out, and a curl of smoke rises into the air like a final offering. She watches the smoke lift. When I first came here, I thought the goal was to shine all the time, to be wise, peaceful, certain. She chuckles softly. But even the moon disappears, and no one says it's failed. You look up. Through the clouds, a sliver of sky has opened dark blue, edged in the softest silver. Maybe the moon is behind it, watching. I realized, she says, that being the light doesn't mean being perfect. It means being steady. Even if, just for a moment, the lanterns cast their soft glow in a loose circle now. You sit within it, shoulders relaxed, chest open. For once, you're not trying to hold on to the moment, you're letting it hold you. She asks, who lit the first lantern in you? You think of someone, a teacher, a stranger, a grandmother, a quiet book you read when you were too sad to speak. Someone who showed you, even for a second, that darkness was not the whole story. And you wonder, how often have you passed a lantern without noticing it? She stands and brushes off her knees, gazing at the lights. There's a Zen saying she offers, when the mind is still, the lantern of the heart shines clearly. She turns to you. That light never leaves you, even when you can't see it. Especially then, you look again at the lanterns glowing against the night. You look at your hands, once full of the taper, now empty, but warmed. You look at the soft darkness beyond the garden, and for the first time, it doesn't seem like something to fear. It feels like a place where the light can rest. And so, now holding this quiet warmth in your chest, ask yourself, who have you quietly lit a lantern for, without even knowing it? The lanterns glow behind you. Now, quiet trail of light stitched into the folds of the evening. The nun walks ahead on the gravel path, feet almost silent on the softened earth. You follow your hands empty, but somehow fuller than before. She leads you past the edge of the courtyard into the wild garden, just beyond the temple walls. It's less groomed here, moss giving way to long grasses, stones, irregular plants growing in tangled harmony. Everything hums with life, but not the loud, hurried kind. This is the hush of night creatures, the slow rhythm of roots and wings. You glance down, and something catches your eye. A single footprint right there in the damp mud, pressed near the base of a camellia bush. Not a human footprint. Something lighter, smaller. A fox. The nun sees it too. She kneels slowly beside it, her face thoughtful, like a child seeing a riddle drawn in the dirt. He's been here again, she says softly. You crouch beside her, eyeing the print, the soft triangular pad, the delicate marks where claws touched down. It's so fresh, it almost glistens. He comes and goes, she says. Never seen, only traced. You ask, do you leave food for him? She shakes her head. No, that would make him nervous. Foxes don't come for offerings. They come for presents. She looks up at the dark trees. They teach us about illusion, how we think we see clearly, but really we just catch traces, shadows, sounds of flicker at the edge of the eye. You follow her gaze, half expecting to glimpse a sleek red shape darting through the brush. But there's only wind. Only the faint rustle of leaves moving like whispers through water. She tells you a story as you both crouch near the print. Once a monk meditated in a forest every morning. One day, he opened his eyes and saw a fox sitting just a few feet away. It stared at him, calm and curious. Then it vanished. You nod. Was it real? She smiles. That's what the monk asked himself. And again the next day, and the next. You both rise and begin walking deeper into the garden. One day, the monk stopped asking whether the fox was real. He just bowed to the space it once filled. And something in him softened. She stops beside a stone, half covered in lichen, and looks you in the eye. Not all things are meant to stay. Some are meant to visit, to remind us, then disappear. You glance back at the footprint. Already the edges are fading. A breeze stirs a leaf across it, further blurring the shape. The Buddha warned of illusion. She continues stepping over a fallen branch. All phenomena are like a dream, an illusion, a bubble, a shadow. But that doesn't mean they're meaningless. You nod slowly. Just not permanent. She pauses. Not permanent. Not entirely graspable. But still true in their own way. She crouches again this time beside a patch of wildflowers, small, white, glimmering slightly, with leftover rain. We want so badly for things to stay, she says. A feeling, a person, an answer. You feel that ache, low and familiar, the clutch of trying to preserve what was afraid of what comes next. But some truths, she says, come like foxes, seen only in retreat. A bird calls, somewhere far off, one slow rising note. Then nothing. She stands again and begins walking toward the outer fence of the temple. The path narrows here. Branches graze your shoulders. The night is growing darker, but your eyes adjust. You step into a small clearing with a stone bench. The nun sits, and you join her. "Do you remember the wind chime?" she asks, looking into the trees. You nod. She smiles faintly. "That's a fox, too. It only sings when you're not asking it to." You watch her for a moment. Her eyes are distant, but not sad. More like they're seeing something that's just passed. A glimmer. A paw print. A memory, she continues. We spend so much of our lives trying to hold things. But maybe the lesson is in witnessing them instead. The clouds part just slightly. A few stars peek through a fox constellation. Maybe, or just the kind of light that slips through when you've stopped chasing it. The print will be gone by morning, she says. And that's okay. It was never meant to be forever. Just enough to make you pause. You exhale slowly, letting the idea move through you. Not every blessing is loud. Not every answer stays long enough to be written down. Some come and go, like the fox, leaving you. Only the echo of their presence, the gift of their shape in the mud. She stands and brushes off her robes. You do the same, noticing how your feet feel more rooted now. Not dragging, not restless. You both begin walking back, but not quickly. The night is deepening around you, but it doesn't press in. It holds you like the warm palms of something unseen. And as the lanterns come back into view, flickering like quiet stars, you ask yourself, what have you seen only in passing? So fleeting, you doubted it was real, and yet it changed you anyway. You return to the heart of the temple grounds with the nun, the soft glow of the lanterns, painting golden halos on the wet stones. The rain has vanished now, and in its place, the night breathes a cool stillness, broken only by the occasional drip from a leaf or the distant creak of a shifting tree. She pauses beneath a tall wooden gate, half open to the garden beyond. Her fingers rest gently on the old grain of the post. She's not in a hurry. The world, it seems, has no need for hurry tonight. You stand beside her, your breath softening. She gestures upward, toward the sky. The clouds have begun to part in earnest now, revealing a soft stretch of stars behind them. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet reminder of what was always there, waiting. There was a time, she says, when I used to watch the sky and imagine it was angry. You look at her surprised. I'd see the gray clouds and think they were warning me, she says with a faint smile, that something was wrong, that storms meant I had failed somehow, that my mind was too messy, my life too noisy. You nod, recognizing that feeling, the sense that inner chaos must be a flaw, that rain, real or emotional, is a sign of doing life poorly. She continues, but then I began to see the sky as just feeling its feelings. You tilt your head, curious. She smiles again. A tantrum now and then, a long cry, a full breath, and then the return of light. She steps forward into the open air and lifts her face gently toward the stars. You follow. The clouds, she says, are like emotions. Heavy, full, often misunderstood. But none of them stay. She glances sideways at you. Has anything ever stayed forever in your experience? You exhale. No, not really. Even joy, she asks, as if reading your thoughts. You think. Joy flares up. Sometimes it lingers, but eventually it too moves on. Like sunlight across a wall, she gestures at the sky. The Buddha said, "Nothing is to be clung to as I, me, or mine." He wasn't trying to take our happiness away. He was trying to show us we don't need to own peace for it to visit us. You step beside her, watching as the stars glint through the soft patches of cloud. There's a folk tale, she says, her voice lowering, like the hush before sleep, about a farmer who yelled at the sky during a drought. He shouted, begged, cursed. And finally, when the rains came, he ran around shouting thanks and dancing. But the next year, when the drought came again, he returned to his shouting. You smile. The pattern is painfully familiar. One day, an old traveler passed through and said to the farmer, "You praise the sky when it gives and curse it when it doesn't. But the sky is never angry or kind. It simply is." She looks at you. Like the mind, like the breath, like life. You let that settle. A small breeze moves between you, brushing across your cheeks, like the tail of a cloud drifting past. You can be in a storm, she says, without becoming the storm. You both walk slowly through the gravel again, toward the outer edge of the temple wall. She stops beside a bamboo grove, the thin stalks swaying gently with the night wind. Sometimes, when I feel myself tightening, when thoughts swirl or sorrow sticks, I come here, she says, and I watch how the bamboo moves. She gestures to a tall stalk. It bends, leans, but never breaks. It doesn't resist the wind. It dances with it. She leans back slightly, watching the moon slowly rise above the trees. We do ourselves so much harm by expecting every day to be cloudless, every moment to be calm. She pulls a small piece of folded cloth from her robe. You watch her carefully unwrap it. Inside is a tiny slip of paper, soft from age. She hands it to you. On it, written in delicate brush strokes, are 5 words. Clouds come. Clouds go. Sky stays. You trace the words with your eyes again and again. Simple. Utterly true. I wrote that after a long night of weeping, she says. It was a gift to myself. a reminder that the tears were clouds, and I was still sky. You fold the paper slowly and hand it back to her, but she shakes her head. It's yours now. You hold it in your palm like a small seed, something you didn't know you needed to carry. A quiet moment passes. The stars continue their slow unfurling, and then she says, "You know, when I first came to this temple, I thought enlightenment was a place, like a summit, something you reach, and then you're done." You nod. That sounds familiar too, but I've come to see it differently, she continues. Now I think enlightenment is remembering your sky, even when it rains. She begins to walk again, this time back toward the glow of the inner lanterns, the warmth of the wooden halls. You follow her steps, each one brushing against the gravel, each one a little lighter. The bamboo rustles behind you. A cloud slips silently past the moon, and you ask yourself now, can you let your feelings pass through without believing they are who you are? The path curves gently as you walk, the glow of lanterns brightening with each step, like small suns scattered along the temple's edge. The nun walks a few paces ahead now, her silhouette outlined in soft gold, her pace unhurried. You notice how she seems to glide more than walk, like she's listening for something in the earth beneath her feet. You pass under the outer gate, the one with old iron hinges and a quiet creak that seems less mechanical and more like the wooden frame sighing with age. She pauses beneath it, her hand resting on the weather-worn beam. This gate, she says, was once the entrance to a busy road. Merchants, travelers, pilgrims. It's seen thousands pass through. You nod, running your fingers across the surface, rough and furrowed, with decades of sunstorm and touch. But now she continues. Most who pass it are seeking silence. She steps through and turns, gesturing for you to follow. You hesitate for a breath, then step beneath the archway. Nothing changes outwardly. Same night, same path, same breath. But inside, something stirs. Like a small door opening inward. You glance at her. Why does it feel different just walking through a gate? She smiles. Because it's not the gate that changes you. It's the pause. You tilt your head. We bow at the threshold. She says not to worship wood, but to acknowledge transition. That we are moving from one space, one mindset, one way of being, into another. She gestures behind you. Outside, the world is full of seeking movement, ambition, distraction. Here inside, we listen. We stop needing. You look at the path ahead. It leads to another building, smaller than the others, dimly lit. A place of retreat, maybe. But then she adds, but the real gate isn't this one. She turns and taps her chest gently. The gate opens inward. You blink, the meaning settling like mist. There's a story, she says, as you begin walking again, about a man who traveled far and wide through mountains and storms to reach a legendary monastery said to hold the answers to all suffering. She brushes aside a low branch as you step off the gravel onto softer earth. He arrived at last, exhausted, and found a great gate with golden hinges. He bowed, entered, and was greeted by a kind teacher. "Welcome," the teacher said, "but the answers you seek are not beyond this gate. They are the reason you came here at all." You smile quietly. The man stood there, confused. She goes on. Then the teacher said, "You did not walk through this gate. You walked into yourself." You both reach the smaller building. It's a meditation hut, simple, quiet, one door, no windows. A single candle flickers inside, casting long shadows against the woven mat floor. The nun stops at the entrance. This is where we go when we forget. You peer inside. It's almost empty, save for a cushion and the candle. And yet it feels full, thick with silence, alive with breath. When I first sat in here, she says, I thought I was supposed to figure something out. She steps aside, letting you move closer to the threshold. I thought the gate would open to some new, better version of me. But all it did was bring me back to the self I had been avoiding. You sit at the entrance, legs folded, hands resting in your lap. She doesn't join you right away. Instead, she sits beside the door like a guardian, or maybe just a witness. The Buddha said, "It is better to conquer yourself than to win 1,000 battles." She folds her hands in her lap. But sometimes the real battle is just sitting still long enough to see who's home. The candle flickers again, its flame bending briefly before returning upright. You stare at it. And for the first time in a while, you don't feel the need to move. The nun speaks softly now. When you breathe in this space, what do you find? You inhale gently, stillness, warmth, maybe a little sadness or gratitude. It's hard to name the feeling exactly. It moves too fluidly. She says, "The gate is not a place you pass through once. It's a place you return to every moment you choose presence over projection." You nod. It's not dramatic. It is not cosmic. It's just this sitting, listening, breathing. She rises not to leave, but to walk a small loop around the hut. Her steps are soft, rhythmic. She circles once, twice, then returns and sits on the opposite side of the candle from you. Now together, you both breathe. The candle doesn't flicker. It simply is. The hut doesn't offer revelations, just space. And suddenly, you realize how many gates you've walked through today. Some visible, some internal, some unnoticed until now. You can carry this gate with you, she says at last. Wherever you go, it opens the moment you remember to return. You look inward now, not with your eyes, but with your awareness. Inside, there's a door. It isn't locked. It never was. And as you sit at the edge of that small room, with your breath deep and soft, ask yourself, what part of you have you been standing just outside of waiting for permission to enter? The meditation hut remains behind. Your candle still burning as you and the nun make your way back along the path. It's nearing midnight now, though time has become almost irrelevant. The world is draped in stillness, and everything seems to move at the pace of breath. Your feet press softly into the earth. The lanterns have burned lower, their light quieter now, like fireflies drifting just above the ground. The nun walks beside you, saying nothing at first. There's nothing missing in the silence. Eventually, she leads you toward a small, open-air porch near the kitchen building. A simple wooden table sits there, and 2 cushions. A teapot waits its steam rising in a soft spiral. 2 new cups, and beside them, placed without ceremony, a cracked teacup, its break filled with gold. You sit, and so does she. She picks up the cracked cup, turning it gently in her hand. Kintsugi, she says softly. Do you know the word? You nod faintly. Golden joinery, she smiles. Yes, the art of mending with precious metals. Not to hide the break, but to honor it. She places the cup down before you. I've drunk from this cup since the day I arrived, she says. It broke a week later. I wanted to throw it away. I thought it was ruined. You look at the golden vein running down its side, glinting in the lantern light, like a healed scar. But my teacher, an old stern nun with a laugh like thunder, taught me this. Only what's been broken can be made radiant. She pours tea into the cup. The steam curls upward, as if remembering something. Now I use this cup for offerings, she says. For the mornings, I feel tender. For the days, I'm reminded I still have growing to do. She passes it to you. Tonight, it's yours. You hesitate. It feels like too much, too delicate, too symbolic. But you accept it with both hands, letting its warmth meet your fingers. You sip. The tea is deep and earthy, steeped longer maybe. Not sweet, not bitter, just honest. She holds her own cup, unbroken plain, and sips with you. You know, she says, I used to try so hard to be uncracked. I thought enlightenment meant becoming whole in a way that could never break again. She sets her cup down gently. But now, I think it's the opposite. I think it means breaking with grace and letting yourself be mended with light. The wind stirs again. A nearby tree shakes loose one last raindrop. It lands with a tap on the railing. There's an old parable, she says, about a woman who lost everything. Her home, her family, her will to go on. She came to a temple like this carrying her grief in a bundle of silence. You watch the steam rise from your up, the tea inside now still. She asked the teacher, "How do I fix this?" And he gave her a pot with a crack down the middle, told her to carry water in it every day. You smile. You know where this is going. Months passed. The water kept leaking. But along the path, wild flowers began to bloom. When she noticed them, she began to smile again. The nun picks up a small stone from the porch floor and rolls it between her fingers. We keep thinking the leak is the problem, but sometimes it's how we water what we cannot yet see. You glance at the cup in your hands again, the golden seam glowing like a thread of dawn. There are still days I feel cracked, she says. Moments I feel sharp or hollow. But then I remember this cup is still a cup. She leans back slightly, her face lit softly by the nearest lantern. The Buddha said, "Just as a solid rock is not shaken by the storm, so the wise are not affected by praise or blame." But he didn't mean we never break. He meant we do not lose ourselves when we do. You sip again, slower this time. You taste the tea, but also the story. The history held in the gold. The nun watches the trees swaying gently in the wind. "I like to think each of us has a golden seam," she says. "Something that reminds us where we've been and how tenderly we've healed." She looks at you and how much light we've let in through the cracks. You set the cup down gently. Its warmth lingers in your palms. She speaks again softly, as if not to wake the night. You may not feel radiant yet, but you are being mended, bit by bit. You nod, not because you're sure, but because something in you trusts it might be true. You both sit quietly for a while, letting the tea cool, letting the silence return. The lanterns pulse gently in the wind. The night deepens, and now, as you feel the warmth of that cup softening your hands, and something deeper inside your chest, ask yourself, what golden seam are you already carrying that once felt like failure, but now holds something sacred? The cracked cup rests quietly on the wooden table, its golden seam glinting in the glow of the last lanterns. You linger there with the nun, not speaking, not sipping, just breathing. The tea is finished, but something fuller has been poured into the space between you. A soft breeze pushes through the garden, sending a ripple through the bamboo leaves. You hear it before you see it, the gentle rush of water somewhere close. Not rain this time, something more constant, more certain. The nun rises. "This way," she says. You follow her down a narrow path that curves behind the temple, past a tall stone wall covered in lichen. The sound of flowing water grows stronger, soothing, steady, like the murmur of a friend, too old to raise their voice. The path opens into a small clearing, where a stream winds its way through polished rocks and moss-covered banks. It isn't wide, but its current is clear, uninterrupted, humming with quiet power. This, she says, is where the raindrops gather. You kneel by the stream. The water is smooth, dark, moving with purpose, but never hurrying. Every rooftop, every leaf, every blade of grass, the rain slides from all of them and makes its way here. You watch a single leaf twirl on the surface of the stream. It drifts, spins, moves on. No drop resists, she says. No drop needs to know where it's going. They simply follow. You let your fingertips touch the stream. It's cool, almost startling, but clean, real. She sits beside you on a flat stone. Her robes brush the moss gently. The Buddha said, just as rivers flow into the ocean, losing their name and form, so the wise lose the self and become one with truth. You let that settle in, watching the stream bend around stones, split briefly, then merge again. We spend so much of our lives trying to hold our shape, she continues, trying to be someone, to define, explain, protect. But the raindrop doesn't say, I must stay raindrop. You smile. It becomes the stream. She nods. And the stream becomes the river. And the river, the ocean. You watch the water move. No part clings to the one before it. It all flows. I used to think I had to become something, she says. A better nun, a wiser woman, a calmer soul. But the more I sat, the more I listened, the more I realized I am already part of the water. You pick up a small pebble, smooth and wet, and turn it in your palm. But don't we lose ourselves in that? She looks at you, not with correction, with compassion. No, she says. We find that the self was never a solid thing to begin with. Just movement, just water dancing. You let the pebble fall back into the stream. It disappears without a splash. She tells you a story. There's a tale of a raindrop, she begins, who was afraid of falling. It clung to a branch high above the forest. The other drops had already let go. But this one whispered, I'll disappear. I'll be nothing. You nod. You've known that fear too. But eventually, the drop could no longer hold on. It fell, and for a moment, it was falling, alone, uncertain. Then Splash It became the stream, and it never felt alone again. You watch the current slip by, effortless, silent, absolute. The fear of falling never tells us. She says that what we fear becoming might be the most natural thing in the world. She leans forward, trailing her fingers through the water. The surface doesn't resist her. It simply parts, then closes again. I have let go of many things, she says. My name, my past, my plans. Sometimes, even my hope. She smiles, not Sally, but never my path. The stream curves away into the trees. You can't see where it leads, But somehow, you don't need to. It's enough to know it goes. She rises again. Come, she says. I want to show you something. You follow her across a small wooden bridge spanning the stream. It creaks beneath your feet, but it holds. On the far side, a circle of stones forms a clearing. In the center, carved into a slab of rock, is a symbol, a wave flowing into an open circle. This is the rain's return, she says. You touch the carving lightly. To what? She smiles. To itself. You stand there in silence, hand still on stone, and you understand the drop doesn't disappear. It becomes. It joins. It continues. Even the parts of you that felt shattered, lost, scattered, they too are on their way to the ocean. You look back at the stream. You no longer see 1,000 raindrops. You see one movement, one becoming. The nun bows her head gently. There is no end, only return. You breathe deeply. Your chest opens like a leaf catching the last light of dusk. The stream flows beside you, and now ask yourself, what part of you is ready not to vanish, but to return to the greater current? You walk in silence, now side by side with the nun, as the stream murmurs behind you, and the trees open again to the central courtyard of the temple. The night has grown deeper, but not darker. The stars have emerged in full, now scattered across the sky like grains of rice spilled by the hand of a dreaming monk. There's a stillness in your limbs, in your breath, in your chest. A stillness that isn't emptiness. It's fullness, without weight. You return to the main hall, and just outside the door, 3 objects are arranged neatly on a small wooden bench. A shallow bowl, a handbell, and a folded cloth. The nun walks to them slowly, reverently. She unfolds the cloth, revealing a cushion beneath it, then sets the bowl in front of it. The bell rests beside her hand. This is how we close the day, she says. No announcements, no alarm, just breath, bowl, bell, and being. You kneel beside her. The bowl is filled with clear water, still as glass. The surface reflects the starlight, and the curve of the eaves above like a painting. We don't do this to mark the end, she says softly. We do it to remember that endings are simply another way of arriving. You nod the words already floating down into your body, like leaves into a pond. She takes a slow breath in, then releases it gently. The bell remains still. The bowl remains full. You both sit without moving, and time steps back. You feel your heartbeat, not as a rush or a pulse, but as a companion, steady, present, enough. She finally speaks, her voice like cool silk. When I first heard the bell rung like this, I wept. I didn't know why. I just did. You glance over. She smiles faintly. Maybe it wasn't sadness. Maybe it was the sound of something inside me exhaling. She picks up the bell and holds it between her palms, not ringing it yet, just letting it warm in her hands. Then she asks, "Do you know how a bell sings?" You shake your head slowly. She raises it slightly and says, "It sings because it is empty." She strikes it gently. Gung! The sound swells, fills the air, brushes against the walls of your chest. It's not loud, but it is complete. You close your eyes. It vibrates through your skin, and then softly, gently, it fades. Silence returns, and yet the sound seems to linger somewhere behind your ribs. She looks at the bowl. It hasn't moved. And yet, something feels different. The bell teaches us to let go, she says, to rise in sound and return to silence. You both sit again, simply breathing. After a few minutes, she speaks once more. The Buddha said, "Meditate. Do not delay lest you later regret it." But meditation isn't sitting stiff in lotus pose. It's being here, exactly as you are, with the bowl, with the bell, with your breath. She lifts the bowl now and offers it to you. Would you like to pour it? You take it in both hands. The water is warm from the air light and peaceful in its container. She gestures toward a small pine sapling nearby, its branches thin, stretching quietly upward. You kneel beside it and slowly pour the water at its roots. The earth drinks in the offering without a sound. You sit back on your heels. The nun joins you. "We care for this tree each night," she says. "So it grows slowly, so it remembers." You glance up at its slender shape. What does it remember? She smiles. That growth doesn't need to be seen to be sacred. You both stand now, the candlelight flickering behind you. She gently replaces the bowl on the bench and folds the cloth again with careful fingers. Then, with both hands, she lifts the bell once more and strikes it again. Gong. This time, it fills more than the air. It fills the space between your thoughts. You breathe it in, and as it fades, she places the bell down. She folds her hands and says, "We practice not to become perfect. We practice to become present." You look up at the stars, their quiet shimmer matching the lanterns below. Everything is reflecting everything. The wind is soft, the temple is quiet, and you are here, entirely here. So now, as the night leans closer and the bell's echo lingers in the edges of your breath, ask yourself, can you live your life like the bell, resonating fully, then returning to stillness without fear? The temple is nearly asleep now. The lanterns glow like the last embers of a fire, their paper skins fluttering gently in the breeze. Somewhere in the kitchen, a pot clicks softly as it cools. A cicada trills once in the trees, then falls silent. Even the stream beyond the garden seems to whisper more quietly now. You sit once more beneath the awning near the main hall. The wooden floor warm beneath you. The nun lowers herself beside you with the ease of someone who no longer hurries for anything, not even sleep. The sky is open above you, clear now. Not a cloud remains. The moon is rising from the horizon, round and soft, as if smiling over the temple like an old friend. She gazes upward. "You've walked a long way tonight," she says. You nod. Not just in distance, but through the hidden halls of the self, the ones with locked doors, faded signs, quiet corners where dust has settled for years. "I'm glad you came," she adds. "Not just to this temple, but here." She taps her chest with 2 fingers. "To this moment." You look around the pine trees, swaying gently, the garden still damp from the storm, the footprints already fading, the cracked cup still glowing faintly with its golden seam. Sometimes, she says, we chase peace like it's a destination. But peace is more like a room that's been waiting for you. You just need to remember how to enter. You breathe in. It's true. You can feel it. She shifts slightly, hands resting in her lap. The Buddha taught that liberation isn't escape, she says. It's intimacy with what is. She turns her face toward you. Even the difficult parts, even the thoughts we try to avoid, even the rain. You glance out toward the courtyard, remembering the first drops that fell when you arrived, how you hesitated at the gate, how wet leaves clung to the stones, how the broom whispered along the corridor floor, how the toad blinked once and taught you everything you didn't know you needed to hear. She adds, "You've seen now, the raindrops don't ask for patience. They teach it." You smile softly. A deeper kind of smile, the kind that doesn't come from pleasure, but from presence. "There's one last story," she says, voice soft now, barely more than breath. You lean in slightly, listening with your whole body. A young girl asked her teacher how to be calm, like the monks she saw in the temple. "I want to be like the moon," she said, "always shining, always still." You nod, picturing the girl barefoot, eyes wide, full of questions. The teacher told her, "Then first be like the puddle, still enough to reflect the sky. Not perfect, just clear." She looks out at the courtyard. "I spent many years trying to be the moon," she says. "But now, I just try to be the puddle." You close your eyes. Inside your mind, the reflection of lanterns, the curve of a pine needle, the drop before it falls. The bells hum, the bowl of tea, the stream flowing out of sight, the soft rustle of robes, your breath. When you open your eyes again, the moon is higher. The nun rises. She places her palms together and bows, not as a performance, but as a blessing, a seal on this night. You bow in return. Then she turns and walks slowly toward her quarters, her shadow stretching long behind her, then fading as she passes beneath the darkened archway. You remain seated, not because you're waiting, but because there's nowhere else to be. The wind hushes, the light softens, and your breath is the only thing that moves. Now slow, smooth, like water over smooth stone. You're still here. The gate is open. The bowl is empty and ready. The bell has rung. And now gently ask yourself, are you willing to live? As the puddle reflecting, receiving, returning, the night holds you now. Your body is heavier, but not in the way of burden, more like a leaf resting on still water. Even the air seems to cradle you, gently wrapping you in the hush that follows, deep listening. The lanterns have burned low, their final glow like a whisper across the courtyard. The stars above are steady. You're no longer thinking. You're remembering in that deep, wordless way. The heart remembers the feel of a bamboo ladle, the sound of rain on old stone, the glance of a nun who saw through your stillness and into your becoming. You've followed the raindrop from rooftop to stream, from temple path to ocean's edge. You've watched a bell teach without shouting, a cracked cup offer more than perfection ever could. You've seen how presence is not something we earn, but something we return to, gently, again and again. So now, let the teachings settle. Let the bowl within you hold nothing. Let the breath soften until it disappears into the night. If your thoughts return, don't chase them. Let them pass like mist through pine branches. There's nowhere to go now, nothing to do, only the stillness of the temple, the slow exhale of the earth, and the knowing that you are already enough. The nun is sleeping. The toad has found his hiding place, and the rain, having done its work, rests now in the soil. So do you. Sleep well, traveler. You've walked far, and you've arrived.